talking with businesses last evening, what they're used to is perhaps on a trade mission, you would bring 15 to 25 businesses down here and do some site visits. That is so different than what this unique and significant effort entails.
This is really untilled ground. This is not we don't tend to trade with Mexico, and the opportunities are great.
Well, they say having options is a good thing. So while U.S. President Donald Trump muses about leaving the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, an enormous Canadian trade delegation is in Mexico right now. Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc and hundreds of delegates are meeting with their Mexican counterparts to strengthen trade ties and to seek new opportunities. Meanwhile, reports out of Washington suggest Trump has privately weighed leaving the trilateral trade pact entirely. So what are the stakes for this mission to Mexico, and what might come out of it? Well, let's bring back our front bench. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Brian, how important is this mission to Canada going forward?
It's very important. I would sort of argue there's two universes. The first universe is CUSMA does move forward in the sense that there are negotiations in good faith, and they end up potentially with a new renewed agreement. In that case, strengthening diplomatic and economic ties with Mexico is definitely in our best interest. Having a somewhat of an ally there, even if there are some sticking points with them during the negotiations, would certainly be helpful, I think, during those negotiations. The second universe is CUSMA gets blown up, and the Trump administration basically says we're not interested in renewing, or the more realistic scenario in that universe, they sort of start, but they basically have no real intent to try to find a good landing place for everyone. Well, in that case, we may find ourselves in a universe that we have to strike a deal separately, and obviously starting that conversation, starting that sort of momentum of strengthening our ties is good. And then in both universes, whether we have CUSMA or whether we don't, and it's sort of a separate trade agreement with Mexico, increasing our trade with them seems like a good move as we look to try to diversify from the U.S. They're our third largest trading partner, so trying to increase the percentage in which we are able to send things over there would be certainly to our benefit.
Lisa, I think a lot of people look at this and say, okay, what are the deliverables? What are they coming home with? Dominic LeBlanc, the Canada-U.S. Trade Minister, has already sort of pumped the brakes on that and said, look, we may revisit, we may go back there to hopefully ink some things, maybe some MOUs in the springtime. But when you consider the timeline of that review of CUSMA, we know it's up in July. How much pressure is on this government to make sure that they really are getting things done down there?
If they walk away from this very large contingent of Canadian companies being down there, leaving the Mexicans with the thought, wow, okay, there's a lot more business in Canada than we thought there was. This may be something to keep in the back of our minds. We can't go head to head with the United States when it comes to being a trade partner with Mexico. There's no question about it. But what we can bring to the party is something different. And that is all the work that's being done by the Prime Minister right now on the world stage, bringing together the middle powers and saying, well, maybe we can all link up in a different type of deal, this Indo-Pacific kind of stance. And Mexico is on the Pacific. So if you want to offer an alternative to the United States, or not even an alternative, maybe an additional, do your bilateral with the United States, but there's also this other big world of trade that's available that Canada is part of. And as a result, don't forget about Canada when you're talking about, don't go exclusive with the United States if that's what's being put in front of them, because they've got options, and they've got options on the table.
But Tom, is there a danger here that Canada goes there and, and looks to make some sort of a deal, and to Lisa's point, is rallying the middle powers? We know the last time that Prime Minister Mark Carney, when he was in Davos and he gave that speech, it drew the ire of President Trump. How much of a tightrope do you think that both President Sheinbaum and Prime Minister Carney have to walk here to make sure that they're not taking a victory lap after this, sort of in the face of Donald Trump?
Well, burnt toast at breakfast draws the ire of Donald Trump. Everything draws his ire. It doesn't really matter.
I mean, who likes that, Tom? Let's be honest. Nobody likes burnt toast. Come on.
But here's the deal, and it is about deals. Trump has already signaled, as you correctly said at the outset, Mike, he's already musing that he probably doesn't even need this deal. That's pure positioning, bargaining, Trump. The art of the deal. It's his usual game. What he did last time, though, when we got rid of NAFTA and came in with Kuzma, NAFTA, of course, in Donald Trump's telling, worst deal the U.S. ever signed. Kuzma, the best deal they've ever come up with. Of course, to the untrained eye, it certainly looked a heck of a lot like NAFTA. But what we got was the usual threat. And then we saw Donald Trump sidle up to Mexico and almost come up with a bilateral deal, which forced the hand of the Trudeau Liberals and brought things forward. This time around, what we're doing is taking the Jean Chrétien Team Canada approach on steroids, bringing hundreds of business people down there. As Lisa set out, I mean, she was talking about the Indo-Pacific before, where she was last week, but at the same time, Canada has set out to establish new trade relations around the world. Carney's been super busy doing it, not only trade relations, but tapping into the big world markets, whether it's in the Middle East or in Europe, with regard to the availability of capital to build some of the big projects, he says, and I think he's right, are necessary to move Canada along without the type of trade relationship we had in the past with the U.S. Everybody agrees that part's gone. I don't think anybody believes that that extraordinary Davos speech that was really picked up and admired around the world is the cause of any ill feeling with Trump. The bad stuff started before. So let's deal with the reality of a Donald Trump who's absolutely unpredictable. I think Kirsten Hillman said it the best, our outgoing U.S. ambassador. She said, look, she has no idea what's in Trump's mind, but she knows that there are a heck of a lot of smart American elected officials and senior government types who know that Kuzma is essential for them. So keep that in mind, but at the same time, cover your bases. Make sure that you're working everything you can to get new trade relations to protect Canada and its economy going forward.
And Rob, I guess coming back to Brian's point of a world with and a world without, this is basically laying the groundwork for whatever world we end up in after July.
Yeah, and I think there is an element of gamesmanship always with Mr. Trump. I agree with Tom. It's incoherent a lot of the time, but at the end of the day, he's going to have to see, or people in his administration are going to have to see, that prices are going up for Americans, that free trade has worked since 1988. So we're talking about 1988 earlier. Goods and services have gotten cheaper relatively cheaper for Americans and Canadians thanks to free trade. And then with Mexico as well. 50% of the fruits and vegetables that are sold in the United States come from Mexico. So these are integrated economies. The auto industry is integrated between all three countries. We know that Mr. Trump has caused chaos for that. But if you look at how much money General Motors lost last year, I think it was $8 billion. Are they going to absorb all of those losses again and again? Their shareholders aren't going to allow them to do so, or aren't going to tolerate that. And companies, I think, were more afraid of Mr. Trump's wrath sort of 6 months ago than they are now. He's politically weaker than he has been, and he's only going to get weaker. By the midterms, he could be totally emasculated. So I think it's going to be interesting to see whether he tries to force us out of Kuzma, which was his deal in the first place, as Brian was saying. I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, we have to just forge forward, and I think good for a Team Canada mission to Mexico. There'll be more missions to Europe. There'll be more missions to Asia, and it builds on something the government that Lisa was a part of. Stephen Harper was looking at these things a decade ago, more than a decade ago, and I think it was shrewd then, and it's shrewd now.
Yeah.
Brian, to that point, do you see a world in which more of these missions are happening? And it does sort of harken back to that sort of Chrétien era when we know that he took a huge mission to China.
Yes. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, over 300 delegates or sort of, participants,
yeah.
That's incredible, right? So absolutely. I mean, not only for all the reasons that we're opining here on this Monday night about why it's important, I mean, people are actually voting with their feet, as we would say, by going on these types of missions.
Yeah.
So clearly there's lots of interest, and these people all agree for their respective businesses, organizations, it's important. And obviously collectively it's important for Canada. So the answer is absolutely.
Lisa, I'll give you the next on that.
Well, all I'm going to say is we're talking about all kinds of other trade relationships. Watch for the April visit to India. I think that is going to be incredibly significant, and it's going to be a different deal than the one we have with China. China is going to be very cautious. The one with India may not be as cautious, and it's going to open up, I think, a lot of avenues. And having that connectivity with India, as well as being able to talk to Europe, that puts Canada in a very, very different position. And I swear, I feel like I'm talking as if I'm a pundit for the Liberal Party of Canada right now, but my eyes were opened when I was in Asia in terms of how everybody is actually working together to try to get this up and running in terms of trade, so that you do have a good defense against what Mr. Trump and his administration are attempting to do. And, you know, I'm excited for the first time in a long time. We're not going to sit down. We're going to win the gold medal for hockey, and we're going to make sure that we got trade agreements all around the world. It's a good time to be a Canadian.
Yeah, and you know what? Nobody can top that on this panel. Lisa has said it. Canada is winning the gold medal in hockey, women and men, I'm assuming. She is just saying there. Mark it down. You heard it here first. Yeah, we've got it. Mail this one in. It's Lisa's lock. And you know what? I'm mailing that to myself. Nobody else can take that idea. I think that'll be something big in the future. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, Rob Benzie, thank you all for being here.